Groupthink's grip, how movements betray their cause. Welcome to this deep dive into the world of collective movements, how groups come together around big ideas, those collective efforts where people rally for change. It's something that touches all sorts of areas, from environmental pushes to fights for fairness in society or even health initiatives. What really grabs me is how these dynamics can start with the best intentions but sometimes veer off track, leading to efforts that don't quite hit the mark. We'll unpack that step by step, looking at the psychology behind it all and why it matters for anyone who's ever felt part of something bigger. Before we continue exploring these collective dynamics, a quick note. If a historical insight or key revelation strikes you, please share the episode, and follow or subscribe for more. So, picture this. You're scrolling through your feed one day, and suddenly you're bombarded with stories that pull at your heartstrings. Maybe it's images of injustice or calls to action that make you feel like you've got to do something. That's how a lot of these collective movements hook people in at first, through emotions and that sense of urgency. It's like an algorithm feeding you more of what stirs you up, building this narrative that the world's problems are black and white, with clear heroes and villains. You start identifying with the group, gaining followers or friends who cheer you on, and it becomes part of who you are. But here's the teaser. What if that tight-knit unity, that rush of belonging, actually blinds the group to better paths forward? What if the drive for harmony ends up wasting energy on flashy actions that don't lead to real wins, especially when money gets involved? We'll explore how these closed-off ways of thinking can turn passion into something less effective, drawing from patterns seen across different causes. All right, let's get into the meat of it. Think about a typical journey someone might have in one of these groups. It often starts innocently enough. Maybe you're in your mid-20s, working in a space where everyone's fired up about the same issues. Your surroundings reinforce it. Colleagues are all on board, sharing the same views. You build a persona around advocating for change, pushing ideas like banning certain practices or calling out big systems as the root of evil. First, it's empowering. You organize events, make content that goes viral, and feel like you're making waves. I remember hearing about one case where videos on a protest got millions of views, drawing people to the site and creating this intense emotional bond. But over time, doubts creep in. You notice inconsistencies, like safer alternatives being ignored because they don't fit the group story. Or during a crisis, say a global lockdown, you see how extreme measures reveal the impractical side of the demands. Plastic use skyrockets, but society absorbs it without collapse, challenging the doomsday vibes. Yet speaking up feels risky. The group's mindset is so sealed that questioning means you're not a true ally. You self-censor, sticking to the party line to avoid anxiety or exclusion. Eventually, something snaps, maybe realizing the end goal requires giving up freedoms you value. You step back quietly at first, then publicly challenge the narrative, facing backlash like being called a sellout. It's a breakup with your old identity, rebuilding from scratch. This pattern repeats in other areas too. In campaigns, for instance, groups might push anti-starvation messages or extreme wellness fads, ignoring science because it doesn't align with the anti-establishment vibe. Protests glue hands to roads or disrupt events, but the energy fizzles without policy shifts. In fairness fights, movements like those against systemic biases start strong with viral hashtags, but internal echo chambers lead to shunning nuanced views, resulting in fragmented efforts that burn out activists without lasting reforms. Now, let's analyze the themes here. At the core is this thing called groupthink, where the push for agreement overrides critical thinking. Psychologists have studied it since the 1970s. It's when harmony trumps reality checks, leading to flawed strategies. In collectives, it shows up as overestimating the group's wisdom, stereotyping outsiders, and pressuring uniformity. Closed mindsets amplify this. They're not just stubbornness but a psychological trap where the need for closure makes people bunker down, dismissing alternatives. This happens especially in high-stress situations or when identity's tied to the cause. You get emotional pulls like atoning for privileges by propping up narratives of oppressor versus oppressed, only to flip and become the oppressor in the process. The group's narrative frames everything as us versus them, with systems like the free market painted as inherently evil or authority-oriented structures as the bad guys. But this binary thinking ignores trade-offs. For example, in movements against globalization, activists might demand utopias without fossil fuels, but the logical end is restricted freedoms, like during lockdowns where emissions drop minimally despite shutdowns. Profit motives make it worse. Nonprofits and organizations rake in funds from donors chasing viral wins, turning activism into a business. Grants flow for awareness campaigns, but they often lead to slacktivism, likes and shares without action. In social justice, foundations fund endless trainings that enrich consultants but don't fix inequities. Health pushes influencers peddle detox myths for ad revenue, diverting from evidence-based policies. This corporatization weakens grassroots power. NGOs mediate between people and power, suppressing real dissent by channeling it into safe, institutionalized paths. Competition for resources distracts from goals, creating echo chambers where dissent's censored. Historically, this echoes how movements in the 1960s shifted as funders guided them toward moderate actions, muting radical edges. The result? Wasted activism, burnout, disillusionment, fragmented groups. Young people feel nihilistic, opting out of life plans because of exaggerated fears, while real issues linger. Polarization grows. Both ends of the spectrum cling to utopian or dystopian visions, paralyzing progress. Yet, turning points happen when censorship eases or external shifts, like platform changes, allow skeptics to break through. Here are some standout lines that capture this. One psychologist put it, "The desire for harmony or conformity in a group overrides the realistic appraisal of alternatives." Another on closed minds, "It's a mode where striving for unanimity overrides motivation to appraise actions realistically." From studies on collectives, collective narratives function as meta-stories incorporating moral codes, driving consensus or dissent. On profit's role, NGOs generate a mode of solving problems that does not challenge basic structures. And this gem on inefficiency, competition for funding distracts from service delivery and advocacy. Finally, the third sector provides a protective layer for the free market by picking up slack and muting criticism. So what's the takeaway? If you're drawn to a cause, that's great, channel that energy. But build a solid sense of self outside the group. Question narratives, seek diverse views, and focus on measurable wins over emotional highs. Support efforts that innovate, like blending old and new strategies for real impact. Avoid profit-driven traps. Back grassroots over big NGOs. In the end, true change comes from open minds and sustained, logical action. Keep thinking critically, stay free,